Namaste everyone. Welcome to another episode of TesterSpeak. This is the final episode of season 3. I'm sorry I'm having to cut it short, but I am going through a difficult time with my health, and it became difficult for me to continue doing these episodes. But we can certainly look forward to season 4 in the upcoming months. But for now, I have a special guest with me for this episode. He's a friend, he's a great tester, and I feel he's one of the most innovative minds I've come across in the recent days. His innovation can be seen in his product that he's working on diligently. So without wasting much time, let me welcome my guest, Tobias Müller. Welcome, Tobias.
Hello, everyone. You should have some contract with Netflix.
Hopefully. Yeah. And talking about videos and stuff, you are very good with videos yourself. I've seen some of the cool stuff that you've done. I am waiting for those reaction videos from your side to come. So
I'm a bit afraid of those, actually. First, thanks of giving me some goods on that. Actually, it took a lot of time to cut those videos, and they never come out as I would imagine them. So I think, yeah, being a director is not a profession that is meant to me. But on the reaction videos, it's like, yeah, I mean, I have those candid conversations, and some of them are backfiring already. So I take a step back and think like, okay, how should the reaction videos look like? Because usually I'm an open person, and I expect that everybody else is open as well. But the problem is some people do not react well to criticism, even if it's meant in a positive way. It can sound negative, but it can be meant in a positive way nevertheless. And most of the people that I criticize, I don't know personally. I just look at what they tell and react of what they tell and give my opinion to that. And I don't want to attack anybody personally, but sometimes it's misunderstood, and I'm working on that to make it actually better.
Interesting.
So as soon as I found like this middle way of still having my own opinion, but phrasing it in a better way, then I will start with the reaction videos.
No, you know what? The reason why I asked you about the reaction videos is because I wanted to have your reaction on the biggest buzzword of the recent days, ChatGPT.
Yeah. My reaction is like, brilliant tool.
No, so what's your impression of ChatGPT?
It's from a technical point of view, it's impressive. I mean, you have to give them that. It's in the end, it's still statistics, and so I learned a lot about GPT-4 actually, and ChatGPT is still based on GPT 3.5, and the thing is, I was always someone who said like, hey, artificial intelligence was already there in the 60s. It was there actually by the end of the 50s. It was there in the 80s again. And I actually, when I went to university, it was just like the end of the second artificial intelligence bubble. And now we are somehow in the third bubble in a sense, or in the third hype cycle. I was like a bit skeptical on it because in the end, it's just statistics on big data, and you generate based on that. But then I saw a video from a Microsoft researcher, actually GPT-4, before it was sanitized, because I didn't know that they actually sanitized their artificial intelligence models to be politically correct and stuff like that. And he had access to GPT-4 before it was sanitized. And that thing did actually impressive things. So you really have to, or I had to rethink afterwards. It's like, hey, what I was an impression is intelligence. Is that really intelligence, or is what we see there actually intelligence? It's just a different way of intelligence. usually my general problem with ChatGPT is that people treat artificial intelligence as being the same as human intelligence, and you can just use ChatGPT for everything that a human is there, and you can replace the human work. And that's not my stance. And I think the bigger problem on that is actually that people just accept the opinion of the majority. So if you see a lot of hype, you accept that and you live the hype, and it's like a full self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is why I most of the time react negative to ChatGPT, but to the underlying technology, specifically for GPT-4, I am pretty impressed, actually.
Excellent, excellent. Well, yeah, the ChatGPT latest version is, of course, based on GPT-4. It's of course available to the pro users who pay for it. The free version is based on GPT 3.5, and I have access to GPT-4, ChatGPT 4, if I want to call that, or the ChatGPT Pro version. It is better than the free version. I mean, yes, and you're absolutely right. It's not a one-on-one replacement for human intelligence. You have to still treat it like a machine. It is, after all, a machine in the end, right?
Exactly, and I'm still not sure on if it's just a different kind of intelligence. But it's my problem with that is like today it's the same story as test automation was like 20, 30 years ago, when it said like we don't need testers anymore because we have test automation. And now it's like we don't need marketing professionals anymore. We don't need lawyers anymore. We don't need doctors anymore. We don't need XYZ anymore. We don't need developers and testers anymore because ChatGPT can do all of the stuff. And that is just something where you have to say like, yeah, not really. Yeah, it's just one more tool in your belt. Use it if it fits. Correct the errors it makes the best you can, and then you can actually have a benefit. It can actually automate more of your daily workflow, and that's good for that.
Absolutely, absolutely well said. I mean, this is another tool in your entire toolkit, and that's exactly how it needs to be looked at, rather than looking at it as a replacement. I was reading an article on Medium, which read the title of that article was "RIP Testers," and I was like, "What?" And it had a bunch of test cases written, and I was like, "No, this is not what testers do." We are involved in asking a lot of questions and things like that, which obviously ChatGPT will not do, right?
I think ChatGPT cannot do it by definition, because ChatGPT is learning from, or actually was trained on everything. And you see exactly the same problem in Wikipedia as well. When I went, I think it was still school. Actually, Wikipedia was a hype because it was like an encyclopedia available for free. You didn't need beforehand, and I guess the younger viewers will not even remember that, but you had to pay for an encyclopedia, and it was extremely expensive. It was like $3,000 to $5,000, like to get those 24 books of the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, and the brilliant idea on Wikipedia was like everybody can change that. The problem is like if everybody can change it, you just get what is common for everyone. So there are no spikes in that knowledge. It's like the common knowledge that is in there, but you don't have the specific knowledge. And then they started with those mediators and owners of content, and everything changed back like to, okay, now we do have the same like the encyclopedia before, and you have approvers, you have publishers, you have reviewers, and all stuff like that. And ChatGPT is not there. So ChatGPT is more or less like trained on all of the stuff, so it gives you average responses. And an average response looks actually brilliant because it matches everything, isn't it? It's like a horoscope as well. If the guy on the other side actually knows exactly how horoscope works from a theoretical point of view, he can give you a text where you fully reflect in. But it doesn't give you anything in the end. I mean, sorry for everybody who believes in horoscopes and stuff like future telling and stuff like that. There might be something in that, but there's also theory on how you can actually make up someone's mind to actually believe the story behind it. And I think that is ChatGPT is currently common sense. Like it learned from everything, and it gives you an answer, but it's not the answer that you would get from a trained professional in that specific field if it's not a job where you are actually just need to inspect something and generate a result out of that. It's like, and I see why everybody's telling like you can replace doctors, because like if you imagine a doctor being the guy looking at like an MRI scan or something like that, like a brain scan, and just identifying some tumors and then like, okay, you have cancer, that's fine. But the doctors, and you might replace this guy. Honestly, you might replace him. But the doctor is far more than that, and you cannot replace the human part that is actually talking to its patients. And it might be different in the States. I don't know if doctors have enough time over there to actually talk to their patients, but at least over here in Europe, you know it. Usually you have a discussion with your doctor, like how do you feel? How did it work out in the last few weeks? How did it work out in the last year? Stuff like that. And yeah, and I don't know. I think intelligence is one part, but a human also has emotions. And it's a combination of, it's like a gut feeling. A gut feeling is nothing with like real intelligence. It's also kind of intelligence, but it's not what you currently call intelligence.
Yes.
It's like if you and the funny part is like, as a tester, and which you might know that, you don't even need a gut feeling. Somehow you always click where the bug will happen. I don't know why, but it's like in daily life, it's like, I don't know, you click somewhere and you say like, let's do this. Oh, okay, bam, it didn't work out. And yeah, there's I get that there's more to being a tester than generating test cases.
Correct, absolutely, and that is something that I have also tried to highlight in some of the articles that I've written. That people talk about test cases, passing, failing test cases. It's not the end of the story. I mean, there is a lot more to do, and ChatGPT, it will enable you to do some stuff, but it is not a replacement at all of any sorts. Okay, so moving on. Now, obviously, with ChatGPT coming in, a lot of questions people have been asking as to what ChatGPT brings into the test automation world, and people have been saying, "Oh, it can write code. It can, it makes life very easy. Whatever code was written by a developer in probably an hour, it can write in a few seconds." Blah blah. But then the question is, what should a tester do when he or she is in such a situation where he or she is able to access ChatGPT? So how should a tester react and use it to their advantage to make them more, robust in things that they do?
What would your response be?
Well, see, it's good to give it a try to see what sort of code it generates. But then obviously you need to analyze that code. Okay, you need to put your intelligence into play as well. You can't just say, "Oh, the code is written, let me just lift it up and do a copy paste and then run it." It wouldn't make sense to me at all. Okay, now the second thing is, are you thinking critically about it? That's something that I would want to know. So that would be my line of thought. Okay, my line of thought is always, am I thinking critically enough? Am I using my logical sense? Am I making sense of what is there in front of me, or am I just doing a copy paste kind of a thing? Somebody once said, the guy who invented copy paste, or the guy or the girl who invented copy paste, should have been given a Nobel Prize, because that is the most used thing in this planet.
And that's the point, isn't it? Because what you just said for ChatGPT is actually true for everything. It's like if you look at developers and Stack Overflow, so the relation between developers and Stack Overflow is driven by copy paste, isn't it?
Yes.
So there is like a handful elite developers who are writing actually answers, and then there's the rest copy pasting that stuff without, and that's the important part that you mentioned, without the critical thinking. Is like, does that really solve my problem right now, and how does that integrate into the existing stuff? And I think people already lost this critical way of thinking like a long time ago when they started doing stuff like that. And you see that now with ChatGPT as well. I mean, everybody's promoting like, oh, see, and I mean, YouTube is full of those videos. They are all doing exactly the same as like, hey, ChatGPT, generate me test case for my customer account database, and then it's generating 10 test cases, and then they tell you, okay, generate me 20 more test cases, okay, and then you have 30 test cases. Now make negative test cases out of that, and then you have 60 test cases. Lovely. So for every positive test case, now I have a negative test case. From experience, you already know, okay, that's going into the wrong direction. But then the next thing is like, okay, now give me code to all of those test cases in Python. And I want to test that with Selenium against the following URL. And then it gives you all of the code, and you have those page object models, and you get everything, and you put all of that in, and it doesn't work. So now what? I mean, the thing is the tool meant to do this? And from my point of view, it's not. It's actually a brilliant tool, and I've tested it for that as well. It's like it's a brilliant tool to find coding errors, for example. It's amazing. It's a lot better than and I guess my eye is just getting old and my brain is also getting fatigued. It's a lot faster than I am in finding those difficult to spot problems. Because in the end, we all do the same problems, isn't it? The same defects. And I think that's the point. So if anybody would ask me, how can I use ChatGPT in my tester's life? Today, I don't have an answer where I would say like, you really have a benefit from that. Because the test cases you get are generic. The code that you get is sometimes working, sometimes not, but you still need to check it because you don't know in advance if it's doing the right thing. And checking code, I mean, testing code is most of the time trivial. The automation code is trivial because you shouldn't have hierarchies and stuff like that, but that's a different topic. So checking it takes exactly the same time than writing it if you're into that. And then I ask myself, like, okay, where is the benefit? Because for result interpretation, I think you cannot use it. I've seen a LinkedIn post yesterday about a tool that says like, okay, with artificial intelligence, we can actually see the impact on a bug. We can actually see the impact of the bug to the user. And I'm still trying to figure out myself on how that should actually work. And I'm playing around with the tool to see actually, okay, how does that actually work and what is the impact on the user? Because honestly, in the bigger projects that we had, usually you don't see the impact on the users. For example, I was part of one of those bigger medtech projects, and the instrument was rolled out worldwide. And in the end, we found out that people in different countries in the world just have completely different expectations. It's like the guy in France wanted to have his list sorted by patient IDs, so by social security numbers. The guy in Germany wants to have it sorted by last names because that is how they work. And it's like nobody will tell you that in ChatGPT that's not in ChatGPT. It will not give you the information. So if you ask me today, in May 2023, where is the benefit of using ChatGPT in testing? I don't know.
Okay, I want to just go back to a part of your response, and you said that it's probably good at finding coding errors. So would you think ChatGPT can play a big role in debugging?
Based on my experience, I would say yes. Based on that, I'm playing around with this in Microsoft has this Copilot, and somehow I don't know. Apparently, they updated the backend because in the beginning, this Copilot thing was, and forgive my French, was shitty. It didn't work out at all. And meanwhile, it apparently really tries to make sense of the code, and in 40% of all of those suggestions, they are actually quite good, and that saves me time. And the same is true for coding and the same is true for debugging in the end as well. It's like finding bugs in software. So in finding coding bugs in software is actually pretty hard. But I think a computer, specifically an LLM, should be able to find that because it can actually generate an answer and can compare, or it can actually generate multiple answers to the same problem, and you can compare your existing answer to all of those possible answers. And I think that's an approach that brings benefits. Yeah.
Now, interesting that you do mention Copilot here in this context, and what I believe is that now Copilot is also powered by GPT-4,
Yeah.
so which is adding a lot of capabilities to what it can possibly do for you. Now, so moving further, I want to talk about how you actually got started with testing and then got into test automation. If you want to give a real, if you want to just look back and tell us a story of how this happened and how did you come to the world of test automation.
So what everybody needs to know, I'm not a tester. I am honestly, I'm a developer by heart. So I started developing stuff, and then I became a project lead, and then I had a lot of contact to the verification and validation group. So for everybody who doesn't know that is actually, if you do formal testing, you do verification and validation. It's required by law. And I had a lot of contact with guys from them, and I found them bugging me all the time, actually, because they always found problems, naturally. And then I got friends with two of them, and we actually saved so the three of us actually saved the project. So what we did is, like, the software was not testable, because, and there was also no specification. Like it's the typical project that everybody's talking about. It's like there are a few requirements, there are no real specifications. You start coding it, then somebody wants to test it, but there are no specifications. You don't know how to test. You can do some random exploratory testings, and you find bugs, a lot of them, because the developers didn't know what to implement. So it's like a project out of the books of how it shouldn't work. And what happened then is actually I made one of the testers my Scrum Master in there, because I said, like, hey, what we need is quality. We don't, the thing is, we need to have like a quality coach. And back then, this quality coach thing was not that famous. And the idea was, like, if you have a Scrum Master who is a coach per se already and checking the process, why cannot be a quality coach? And that turned out rather brilliant, actually, to the project. So we succeeded. And then there was the second friend of V&V, who actually was in another part of the project, and who sat down and did exactly what a good tester actually does, is like talking to all of the stakeholders, and he started to write the specifications. And I don't see that as a tester's job, but back then he realized, like if nobody's doing it, somebody has to do it. So it's me. I'm going to talk to those guys. I do have the capabilities to identify what they want from the system. I'm writing those specifications, and I make sure they are tested. And those are still one of the best specifications that I've ever seen till today. And that is actually how we started the company afterwards, because we evaluated if there are test automation tools for the regulated market, and there were none. So we just said, like, that might be a good niche to start, test automation. And that's what we did. And that is how I ended up, not ended up, but that is how I got into testing, is when you said, like, okay, how would actually a test automation tool look like if testers would design it and developers would implement it? Because usually, if you see those open source frameworks or also other solutions, it's like, it's either driven by developers who think they know how testers work, which, and again, my French, bullshit, or it's like a testing framework written by testers based on the need of having a framework without actually knowing all of those principles in software code. Yeah. So there's a gap where you say, like, hey, you know how you, and that is how it works everywhere else, actually. The business knows their business, and you have developers who actually try to understand the needs of the business and implement it. And that is what we did, and said, like, okay, so if you could, what is it what you wish for a test automation tool? And actually, you would think, like, it's stuff like, I want autonomous testing and yada, whatever, and I want to have this and I want to have that. And in the end, it's more or less like small wishes. It's like, I just want that it can scroll automatically. Yeah. Can it do that? If it doesn't find an element, can it just scroll? If there is something like a scroll bar, it's stuff like that. that people mostly oversee because they are always thinking in those, we need to have the next big announcement ready and yada, yada, yada. And that is actually how I came into testing, because I found it interesting to discuss with testers, because it's a different thing than discussing with developers. It's okay to discuss with developers, but it's always like, yeah, I need to have the newest technology and I have this fancy new framework and I have those, and we need to follow the following principles. And if you look at code today, it's like, in the end, and you shouldn't overestimate it, it's like the software that you have today is still the same stuff as it did like 10 years ago, like 20 years ago. It's still solving the same problems. On a bigger scale, true, but it's still solving the same problems. But if you look underneath, the code is far more complex. You have microservice architecture, you have 15 different layers in your architecture and stuff like that, just because you can. And testing, and specifically test automation, is something else. Like testing is challenging a product, and test automation is actually coding in a, people will understand me wrong here, but in a simplified way, because in the end, you just emulate a user. So what you create is more or less like a virtual user that can always do the same checks. And it doesn't need to be intelligent. The idea is that you actually automate what can be automated, and that gives you more time to do the intelligent stuff on the other side. That's all what it's about. And when I see frameworks that have like 15 different hierarchy levels of stuff and how you can move it, and also it's like there are frameworks and then there are stuff that can scale, and then you have the self-healing cloud that can actually use stuff that can scale. And it's like, it's so complicated. Right? Why can it not be much more simple? And that is why I love to be in this tester space, not because I want to be a tester, because I want to actually understand how testers work, what actually drives them, and how we can solve those problems. And being in that space, somehow you get a tester yourself. I don't know why, but meanwhile, I am the worst customer of our own product, because usually I'm the one that breaks every features when they come out first. And yeah, I think you can, honestly, you learn a lot. The problem is you learn some stuff that you shouldn't have learned because you break all of the products. but you learn a lot, and also like in communication skills, it's a different approach. And if I look at developers, they solve problems. But the thing is, if I ask them, but would you use, so what you just implemented and the user interface that you just created, would you actually love to use that user interface? And most of the time, the answer is, I don't care, it works. But from a testing perspective, and perhaps I'm the only one who makes up the mind like that, but I want to actually test the software in its whole, in the sense of like, is that a software that if I would need to sign with my name underneath, is that something that I can be proud of? Is that something that I want to release? Is that something that I would say like, hey, I'm the one who tested it? And that's different. That's a different understanding on how software should be. Well, sorry for the long monologue, but
no. That's absolutely nice. I mean, first of all, I really want to commend you on that attitude. That I want to feel proud about the stuff that has happened. I mean, it's something that all of us as testers need to get. Okay, need to understand that there is a pride associated with the stuff that you're doing. And that's why I keep emphasizing on the fact that, first of all, be proud of the fact that you're a tester. Be proud of the fact that you are doing things of discovering problems before the customers can actually get it, so that they don't see those problems. So you should be proud of what you're actually doing. And unless you have that pride, I don't think you are headed in the right direction. That's my personal opinion. Number two, I found this very interesting. You said you spoke about design and implementation. Design by testers, implemented by developers. Now, in all my years of experience so far with software, I have very seldom, very, very rarely seen that attitude. Okay, it's mostly the other way around, or mostly it is, oh, it's test automation, it's a tester. Okay. And in a lot of instances, it's like, okay, test automation is a technology which has got no head or tail, which is playing a catch-up game with development. Development, the product life cycle is going in one direction, and test automation is going in another direction. And there you end up solving problems which are created because of test automation itself, and you forget about the problems that you were originally solving for the customer. So what's been your experience when talking to other testers, talking to automation engineers, and what's been your opinion of the whole thing?
One thing on the proud of testers is actually, like, yesterday I received on Instagram, I received a messages like, hey, can you give me a roadmap to become a tester? And I said, like, yeah, sure. Why? And the answer was, because I wanted to become a developer, but my friends told me it's a lot easier to work as a tester. And I said, okay, if that is your only reason to become a tester, honestly, ask your friends why they gave you this advice. Just don't do it. That doesn't make any sense. And on the other side, in real life, honestly, I have seen a lot of testers that actually ended up testing just because it was easy. And you see that in the software, in the result. You actually see that in the quality. That's for the tester. And for the test automation, so if you are a tester, if you have, so as a tester, you have the biggest impact on the product. Your manager is not aware of it. If you are not aware of it, who else should be aware of that? You have the impact. And even if you don't find a single bug, if the customer doesn't find a bug afterwards as well, that's still fine. That's not a KPI how many bugs you find. That doesn't make much sense. If you let's say if you influenced 1, 2, 3 UIs and made them more accessible or whatever, make them look nicer, and people are happy. And think about it. If people start the application and they have a smile in their face because they see an emoji that you somehow brought in there, that is all you need in the end. That's all you need to be successful. So for the test automation thing, I see exactly what you see. That is because people want to be tricked. People love to be tricked. They love to be blended. It's like these days I do a lot of webinars and sessions on marketing. It's like, do not trust the marketing. They make up terms.
Yes.
That means something completely different, but you're coming from a technical background and you interpret like what you put into that. But the meaning that you put into the marketing term is something completely else than what they actually meant in the beginning. They just were looking for a fancy term. But I think we should actually reach out to ourselves. It's like, if you see a demo on a test automation tool, and I give demos every single day to potential customers, and what they actually expect is one of those click and record tools where you just click through a web page or an application, it automatically records those clicks, and afterwards you have a script and you can execute that multiple times over the next 5 years, and it will always run the same test case. And there are tools out there that do that in the beginning, but not over the next 5 years, and everybody knows that. But nevertheless, people are still tricked into that. Nowadays, it's not click and record anymore. Nowadays, it's autonomous testing. It's like, for God's sake, there is no autonomous testing today, and there will never be autonomous testing today. And I also can give you the reason why that's the case. But people still fall into the trap. And I had a discussion just like 15 minutes before we recorded this one. It's like, the only concern of the customer is like, yeah, but do you have artificial intelligence built into your test automation tool? It's like, okay, hey, let me phrase it like that. We do have a deep learning model for text detection. We do have machine trained models for text recognition. And we do have an LLM-based prompt where you can actually enter text on actions that we should execute on the subject on the test. So you can do your exploratory testing and do the automated testing at the same point in time. We learn from the behavior that you give us. And I said, like, is that enough artificial intelligence? I said, like, oh, that sounds brilliant. It's like, okay, may I ask a question now? Yeah, sure. When do you release that? I said, like, by end of this year. But I said, like, okay, so my question is like, what do you expect from that? So what is your benefit from that? What kind of benefit do you expect from that? Yeah, to reduce maintenance effort. So our current problem automation is that the maintenance effort is too high. And hey, surprise, that is one of the major problems in test automation, isn't it? Like you start with something, it works, you adopt it, and at some point in time, it doesn't work because maintenance is too expensive, maintenance is too difficult. You set up on the wrong framework, you build on the wrong project. Meanwhile, it can also be it got bought by a big company, and then you lose access to all of the stuff. And and that is one of the concerns, isn't it? And that is where it brings me back to the initial thing when I said like how I started my journey into testing. It's like people don't understand that there are a lot of problems in their daily task and test automation that are extremely small, but to sum up, and if you solve those small problems, you actually have a huge impact on it without being an autonomous testing tool and stuff like that. Naturally, I'm guilty as well. Honestly, we market test results also as autonomous testing because it is, in a sense, it is. If you see it from a visual point of view, it can at least do some autonomous tasks, but it's not. I will never be the one who claims like, hey, give my piece of software another piece of software and it can autonomously test it, because that's, yeah, how could you say it politically correct? That wouldn't be correct in the foreseeable future.
Well, so you finally mentioned in your response testresults.io. That is a tool that has made me curious, kept me curious. I also said during our AMA that, I tried my hands, and I think in today's context, when there is a lot of, focus on visual regression, earlier we didn't care much about it, but now the focus has increased. The little details, like we call it, so visual regression becomes very important. And when you look around in the market and you look for tools that can help you do that, there are only maybe a couple of tools that I can think of. One of them is testresults.io. And it is, of course, very smooth, seamless integration with any of the other tools in the pipeline or whatever you need to do. But this is me saying it. Now, from a maker's perspective, what challenges did you see that you wanted to mitigate or wanted to take care of? And so you said, okay, let's build a tool. And how did testresults.io come into existence?
How did it come to existence? That's a simple one to answer. Thanks for that question. It's like back then we actually looked at the market and said like, what kind of tools are there? We evaluate them and take the best one. And back then the idea was what we actually saw is like, hey, this visual approach it looks quite interesting. So we want to go. And it's not what you know from like, I don't know if can I name a few tools here?
Yes, of course.
It's not what you would expect like from Applitools, IS or Percy, where you do like an intelligent screenshot comparison. Back then the idea was actually that we can control the system under test based on visual cues. So it's like a human. I mean, you know how an OK button looks like, and you press on the OK button, and stuff like that. You don't look it up in the code following an X path, and you find it somewhere in a diff and stuff like that. It's just like that's not how you work as a human. And I found a tool back then, which was one of the market leaders, more or less. And we bought a license and started automating for a customer of us. And the problem was that we found bugs in the testing tool, which per se is, I guess that's normal because it's also just software. There are also bugs in testing tools. And then actually the horror story started, because the problem is like you have a call with the vendor and tell them like, hey, I have this problem. Can you fix it? Yeah, can you show me the problem? And then back then we showed them the problem. It's like, yeah, okay, that is a problem that we will fix it in the next version. So when is the next version scheduled? Yeah, in 4 weeks from now. Okay, we can do that. We do have a workaround for that. We work around the problem, and then the next version is released. The bug is fixed, and our workaround is broken. Lovely. So now we need to invest even more work for the freaking bug in the test automation software, because so I'm in the middle. So I do have this vendor over here of the tool, and I do have my customer over here, and I'm more or less like doing the services for my customer, the automation, and now I work for free because of the freaking tool. And with that, the famous tool back then was version 16.00, and actually we drove 16.01, 16.02, 16.03, 16.05, and all of those versions were driven more or less by our bug reports. You can actually see that in the history, in the release history, and that was a problem because they didn't suffer the pain that we had, because we had the customer yelling at us like, why is the test automation breaking all the time? It's like, why is it flaky? And we were not able to make a solid test automation in that tool apparently. And that is when we said like does it have to be like that? Is it really like that? Is that an unsolvable problem? And we're really talking about flakiness. Like if I have 10 test cases and 2 don't work out of the box every single time, I do have a solid problem. And if I'm talking to customers today, it's like, I was at a bank like 2 weeks ago, where they said like over the last year, we generated hundreds of test cases, and now 70% of them don't work anymore. We cannot run them anymore. It's like, okay, so what was your invest into that, and what is your return of invest? More or less like, but we don't need to call it an invest, but what was the money, the effort that went into it, and was there any benefit from that, putting that effort into it? And that is actually how and I know it was an evening around 7, 8 in the evening, and we sat around the table and said like, guys, should we try another framework? But we evaluated all of them already, so that was the best, or should we sit together and see if we can do it better? And just say like, hey, we do have developers and we do have testers, and perhaps that's the combination that is a winning combination actually, which has never been in that way beforehand. And we just started and said like, we give ourselves a year to see if it works out. And what we did is like, we did all of the stuff without the tooling. So we did an engine, we did a framework, we did all of the scaling in the cloud and all of the stuff, so that customers of ours could easily upload test cases or any kind of documents, and we automated for them. And they just executed those test cases or their ideas of testing, and actually we suffered the pain from the tool. So if the tooling didn't work, it was our problem. If the test cases were flaky, it was our problem. So there was always only one guy to blame, me. And that's far more trivial. And that's what we did like for 2 to 3 years, actually, to make the tool solid. In the sense of we do not add new features, but we actually make what we have stable, so that we reduce flakiness and reduce maintenance. Because those are the 2 major pain points, isn't it? And nowadays you read about tools with autonomous testing where they say like, hey, we increase your test coverage from 100 test cases to 10,000 test cases. That is amazing. But if your flaky test case rate is 1%, if you increase that coverage like that, you don't know exactly if that is useful tests or not, even in the beginning, you end up with a lot of manual work after your automation. So you identify the stuff that you can automate to save you some time. You multiply that by 100, and now you run that stuff, but now you have more work to manually check the results than you actually had if you would just have tested it manually in the beginning. So that's not what test automation is about. Test automation is about taking work effort from someone away, making stuff that is repeatable.
Absolutely.
Or stuff that needs to run in thousands, 100 million of instances simultaneously that you just cannot control as a human. Take that stuff away and generate freedom and generate space to actually test an application. And a lot of tools in test automation don't cover that.
You're absolutely right. Like I said earlier as well, that in a lot of cases, what happens is we end up solving our own problems.
Yeah,
that is created by us. Us testers, we end up solving our problems and we forget about the problem that we were originally solving for the customer.
Yeah, that's what you said, isn't it? It's like that is the death of the test automation. It's like there's no benefit in test automation if that's the case. If you, as a tester, start to automate and afterwards you have more problems than before, do not automate. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, absolutely. So talking further about testresults.io, what would be the top 3 USPs or something that make testresults.io different from any of the other tools in the market? Right. Just 3. I know you can name a few, but
number 1, it's not a minimalistic tool. So it's not a web page where you can actually enter some text in a specific grammar and you execute that test case. Somehow it is a tool integrated into a professional development environment provided by Microsoft, where you can actually use the new stuff like artificial intelligence while writing your test cases. You can do sharing on the team, that multiple people can work on the same test case, stuff like that, where usually companies invest a lot of money to build it. It's like we just said, like we want to put ourselves into that IDE, and that saves us a lot of resources to actually make the rest stable. So we don't need to hassle around with our own IDE and our own website and all that stuff. So that's number 1. It is only available within that IDE. That's it, period. And the second one is actually that we work visually, and not in the sense of screenshots, but what we do is like, and I know you know that already, but just for the viewers, it's like what we do is we work as a human. It's actually, you give us the information like, hey, that is how an OK button looks like, and then we actually use your visual cue on the OK button to actually control the application. The same is true for text boxes and drop downs and stuff like that. And that is when number 3 comes into the game. If you ever looked at something that is based on visual cues, you see all of the stuff where they click somewhere and they click again and they might enter some text. But did you ever see a tool that actually selected a value from a dynamic dropdown that is working visually? And the answer to that is no, because it's extremely difficult. You need to identify the dropdown, then you need to open the dropdown, then you need to find the right you actually need to find the dropdown, which is dynamically sized, and there is no image to identify it. Then you might need to scroll to the right entry and stuff like that. So that stuff is extremely difficult if you use visual cues, and that is what we simplified. And that is exactly the benefit. Is like what you see, for example, in Selenium 4 are those relative locators. So you say, like, I have the label XYZ, and I need an element next to it, and the closest match, stuff like that. And we do have that for the visual cues as well, because and you've seen that in another tool which was like promoted like 2020, 2021, where you said like, hey, we have Vision AI. Now you can work everything with Vision AI. And you actually saw that they do have problems, like the state of a button is extremely difficult to detect, because what looks as a button in one application might be a text entry field in another application. And we've solved those problems, actually. That is what I meant. It's like, it's those small problems. It's not where you put in like, hey, it's autonomous testing and it does all of the stuff in the discovery and it doesn't need you as a tester anymore. It's really like solving those everyday shitty problems that you stuck all the single time. It's like, I cannot identify the element. If I identify it in a week from now, it's not stable anymore. It doesn't work like that. I cannot select the element. I cannot enter the text here, stuff like that. And usually if you see visual testing, it's most like I find some hyperlinks, I follow the hyperlinks, I take screenshots, I compare those screenshots, and that's it. Yeah, that's fine, but nobody's using an application like that. Jesus Christ, even a simple login form or like an application form for a passport or whatever, you need to select the salutation. You're like, okay, there is a dropdown and I need to select Mr., Mrs., X, whatever, diverse, whatever you want to select in that field. You need to open it and you need to select something. It's not you can just follow hyperlinks. It doesn't work like that. And you see a lot of demos that do not make much sense in the long term, because they do not fix those basic problems in test automation. And those are the 3 things actually. And in a summary, those 3 are actually, the first one gives us time to do the second 2, and that is why we have a stable execution environment.
Excellent. I love the way how you summarize the 3 USPs. From a tester perspective, it makes life so easy, and I have actually the time to focus on the customer's problem rather than worry about creating my own problems and dealing with it. So thank you from my side and from the testing community for creating such an amazing tool. Now, I know that we have been talking a lot of serious stuff so far. So I have got a little segment called the rapid fire in my TesterSpeak episode. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. You don't have much time to think. probably 5 seconds for each answer is the time that you have to think. So here we go. So the first one for you is, which is your favorite nursery rhyme?
My nursery what?
Nursery rhyme.
I don't even understand.
Are you still? I mean, you. So your child is still very young.
For the baby, it's funny. It's Rivers of Babylon from Boney M. We are singing it all the night to get her asleep, actually. So it's not like a nursery rhyme. It's really like by the Rivers of Babylon, where we sat down. That was an amazing hit in Germany, actually, I think in the 80s or something like that. And I don't want to promote it because I'm ashamed if I have to sing it in public.
No, I'm not going to ask you to sing. Okay, and so you are a fan of reaction videos. You do them yourself. So any particular reaction video that you really love, or any particular
doing myself?
Videos? Sorry.
Doing the reaction that I would love to do by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, and I know that a lot of people will feel offended by that, but I would love to do a lot of reaction videos on some of those claims that testing can only be human and only humans can be tester, because I see test automation as a tool, and and I do that at some point in time, and I see the benefit of test automation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have invested all my money into that. And somehow I cannot stand this, and I think we discussed it last time already. It's like this differentiation between testing, checking, inspecting, yada, whatever. It's like making up like a science, like make a science out of my profession just to be important in my professional space, which is something that I, from a personal point of view, cannot stand. Not from a professional point of view. I can understand the idea, I can understand the intention, and I guess I would do exactly the same, to be honest. But from a personal point of view, I think that is like over-engineering on what I do, stuff like that. And that is where I would love to really call out, is like, what is the benefit of the discussion of the last 20 minutes? Something like that.
And okay, and the last question, and I don't want you to think too much about it before you answer. It's something that I have always been meaning to ask you. We touched upon this in a very small conversation at some point. So I want to know your candid opinion on the state of testing conferences.
Broken. They are just broken. It's like from any point of view. If you look at the, and I know you are a speaker, so don't get me wrong. If you look at the speakers, it's like a speaker's circle. Most of the time you see the same faces. You have those fresh faces awards somewhere, and if you look at those fresh faces awards, most of them, those awards are around ideas, but not really stuff that is impactful. It's like ideas, and they are just forgotten like 2 years later. And I think that you need to get rid of that. You need to make it smaller. You need to make it impactful. You need to make it so that people walk away and say like, hey, I learned something out of that. And then, so that's from an audience part of view, from a speaker part of view. From a vendor's part of view, hey, those prices are skyrocketing. I don't know exactly why, but you see a lot of the smaller vendors will not go to those trade shows anymore. They will not go to the fairs anymore because the prices are just too high for what you get. Honestly, I have to discuss about power on our booth. I need to pay $300 a day for the freaking power outlet that doesn't work out. And the last one is from an audience point of view. If you have, for example, like a 5-day conference, which that is like in the last 2 days, how much can you still learn? I mean, you can learn for a specific amount of time, but like having a 5-day conference filled from morning at 9 till 4 in the evening, how much can you absorb as new knowledge? It doesn't make much sense. And most of the stuff on those conferences is also on repetition. And I have a feeling they will go exactly the same way as the developer conferences did in the past. Like you always had those developer conferences and you always had those exclusive goodies over there to make you attend. But meanwhile, everything is virtual. It's faster and it's just more direct. And it's also smaller. It's like if the audience, I love to have a smaller audience because you can be more specific, more precise. You can ask this like, hey, what are your today's problems? Can we somehow discuss about your problems now? I do have a mindset. You have a mindset as well. You try to solve your problems. Let's try to solve it together. Let's find a better solution. And that's a lot better than standing in front of the crowd telling about the last successful project that we did for the last 12 months and stuff like that.
So,
and I'm guilty myself. I did that myself, so I'm guilty myself on that. But it's like people. I guess we all learn.
I understand, but talking about conferences, there are some conferences that, of course, stand out. For example, the Selenium Conf that happened recently, which had some amazing topics. You could keep an eye out, know what's happening in that open source world, how contributors are trying to make a difference. There were a lot of new things being discussed, new ways of meeting those challenges, dealing with those challenges, ideas being poured, those kind of things. So would you like to see conferences going in that direction, or are there any different ideas that you would like to
there is also the thing like a few years for unconference. They actually call it unconferences, isn't it? At least over here in Switzerland and Germany, they call it unconference. I don't even know if that's an English term or not. It's like there is actually no agenda. Like people go to the unconference and make up the agenda on the whiteboard. They identify a speaker, and then that's actually where you learn and have vivid discussions. Actually, I at some point in time, like 2 years ago, I ended up discussing with a vendor on how they actually test their test automation tool, which was extremely interesting, and everybody could learn about that. Is actually because it's such a specific piece of software. It's like, how do you test a tool that is meant to test other tools? It's like, how do you do that? What specific technologies do you have? How do you solve these problems in a daily life? And how do you solve this? And yeah, I love to see that actually. I love to see that. And Selenium Conf can be the exception actually, but it's also something if it's user driven. Usually, if you talk about trade shows and conferences, what pops up into my mind are those commercial conferences.
Right, and talking about tools being able to test themselves reminds me of that instance I even wrote about it on LinkedIn. So I was attending this conference, and one of the vendors, one of the sponsors said, "Oh, we have this amazing tool which has autonomous testing capabilities and all of this." And so I asked them a question. After they did their demo, they opened the floor for questions, and I asked them, "Okay, so how did you test it?" Then they said, "No, we wrote a bunch of automation tests, blah blah," and something like that. And I said, if you claim that your tool can test everything, then why didn't you use your own tool to test itself? That's one thing. And so to that they said, no, it was still developed, so we didn't want it. I said, okay, so what was the solution? Then they said, oh, we tested it manually.
Isn't that amazing? Specifically, if you claim it's autonomous.
Exactly.
The pure sense of the word, actually autonomous. It's like, how can you actually say that it's not working on this piece of software? It's autonomous. It should actually understand it. But I feel your pain. But if I would have been in the crowd, I think I would have asked exactly the same question. As like, okay, so how do you test your autonomous testing tool?
Exactly.
And if they would have said like, hey, we tested with our tool, I would have said, okay, and how do you trust the results?
And the same thing with regards to ChatGPT. Okay, so people were really excited, saying, "Oh wow, there is this new tool from OpenAI, ChatGPT. It can do this. It can write test cases for my login page. It can write API test cases and this and that, and it can, write Selenium code and this." They went gaga about it, and I said, "Have you tried asking how to test itself, or what would it do to test GPT 3.5, because the initial release was on 3.5, and the answers that you got in the very early days were crappy. Nothing to do with testing of AI models. It was generic stuff. Okay, it is somebody with a little sense of testing would be able to say. It had nothing to do with innovative, creative ways of testing an LLM. There are different ways, there are different approaches to testing AI models, but it said nothing about it. So, that's when I knew that, no, this is going to be dangerous if people just do the copy paste like we discussed earlier in our discussion. So yeah, that's what it is. So it's funny when people claim that things are autonomous, and then when you ask them, okay, how did it test itself? The answer is no. I'm like, okay, so how is this autonomous?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
yeah, okay. So
it's marketing.
Yeah, it's all a marketing gimmick. Now I want to we have been speaking for about an hour now, and I know that you have customer meetings after this, so I wouldn't want to hold you long. Just a couple more questions that I have for you. So another trend that is quite popular in the industry today is to sort of go behind the trends which gain popularity, rather than people trying to think of innovative ways that suit their context. It is like just follow the trend, do whatever. Now, for example, there was a time when microservices became really popular, so everybody started going in the direction of microservices. A few days ago, I was reading Amazon saying that they want to move away from microservices and go back to the monolithic way of doing things, because they see value, and of course, they are looking at cost as well. So what is your thought on that trend in technology, where people follow trends and not think on their own feet?
Which I couldn't hear you all the time.
Okay. Okay, so sorry about that. Must be. Can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what I was saying is that there is a trend in the industry where, or there is a tendency in the industry where people generally follow a trend and go after it, and everybody starts doing the same thing. For example, when microservices started becoming popular, everybody started going in that direction. Okay, let that be the architecture for our product. It works very well for them, so it will work for us as well. Similarly, when people started talking about DevOps, everybody jumped in on the DevOps bandwagon. Now, suddenly Amazon has started realizing that microservices is not the way of doing things, and they want to get back into the monolith world. So again, people have started thinking about it. I saw a post, and the number of comments that I saw on the post, it was driving me crazy. I was like, okay, already these people are starting to change their mind without even thinking about the implication on their context. So what are your thoughts about such an approach, and especially with regards to test automation?
I think that the thing on Amazon is actually a brilliant example. It's like I saw it on LinkedIn as well, and I saw the amount of reactions, and I saw the comments. I think that thing went viral.
Yes.
Based on the comments, it's really like, did anybody read the freaking original article from that group that did it? Because they said like, hey, it depends on the context, it depends on the domain, you need to set up your KPIs, you need to check actually, is that really a problem to you? Because they were talking about traffic that they generated because of their microservices and the way they designed their solution with the microservices back then, and how they are transferring actually videos to still frames, like a lot of decisions that do not apply to 99% of all of the other softwares out there. So that's just said about this Amazon thing that is currently going everywhere apparently.
Yeah.
And on the trends, is like, what I can only talk about myself. What I usually do is like, I look at the stuff, I read the stuff, I look at people that I trust and see how they react on stuff like that. And I play around with it in the beginning. Honestly, I guess I'm too old, or let's phrase like, I'm too long in the industry actually to jump on the next hype. I've seen everything, and in the end, I mean, we did, back when I started coding, it was Borland Pascal, Borland Delphi, stuff like that. And hey, we created applications. We created complex applications. Afterwards, there was .NET, then there was WinForms, then there was WPF, then there's React. Now we do everything in JavaScript. Now we have WebAssembly for JavaScript so that we can actually have everything compiled to WebAssembly again. It's like history is repeating itself. And the next best hype was already there 20 years ago. And chasing after hypes, it depends a bit. If you are a CTO, so if you are in a strategic position, you need to chase after hypes because customers, and also your internal customers, will expect that from you. But being like in a testing position or in a development position, honestly, I wouldn't jump to all of the new hypes all the time. But again, perhaps I'm just too old.
No, I think that's a very fair way of thinking. People need to be cognizant about their context, about what problems they are trying to solve, rather than saying, "Oh, this worked for them, so it will work for me too."
And that's the problem. That's exactly the problem with this Amazon posting. It's like, it's just important because it's Amazon in the front. If it would say like, hey, Tobias Müller looked at his application and said like, microservices are the wrong decision, I need to create a monolith again, nobody would care. But just because it's Amazon, it's like Amazon does stuff right all the time. And that's not true. It's the same like NASA. NASA does not do everything right. SpaceX does not do everything right. Tesla does not do everything right. Just because there's a Tesla, it's also like that. I do have a Google shirt actually. And I bought it in their visitor store. It looks like a real one. So if I'm walking around in the city, people will ask me if I work at Google. And if you say yes, oh, you work at Google, it's amazing, blah, blah, blah. Jesus, they are also human. There's nothing special. And just because a big company decides on a single project for something else, but yeah, that is like hypes are created, isn't it? With support from Gartner and all of the other Forrester and stuff like that. I mean, they live from those hypes. They need to create hypes. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any reports.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Now, the last question that I have for you today is, give me 3 problems in the world of test automation that you would like people to draw their attention to and find solution to.
Yeah, that is actually test generation, but not in the sense of generating test cases, but actually generating insights on an application based on the information that is available, like combining sources, so like having a document, having some specification, like having unstructured documents and bring that together to generate ideas of testing something. You can claim ChatGPT does that, it doesn't, but the idea is something like that. Then the second one is actually getting the freaking test automation stable. Just do it. Don't do new stuff. Get the base foundation rock solid. That's what I ask everybody actually to do. And you can also help us. I mean, use our tools, generate bug reports, call me directly, send me an email, send a support email, make our product better. Honestly, I even pay you for that if you make our product better. And the last, so having the generation part, and the last thing I see is still test data. That's still a topic where everybody's talking about. There are a lot of tools out there. Everybody's saying like, I solved the problem, but honestly, nobody solved the problem. And the problem is not solvable in a generic way, but that is where I see artificial intelligence as a real benefit on generating synthetic test data based on productive data. So that's a completely different topic, but that is where I think invest into that.
That's very interesting, and in my view also, these are 3 big problems that we can talk about, or we should talk more about, alongside, of course, the problem that has remained for quite some time in the world of testing, and that is around testability. There are not many conversations around it. People generally don't like to talk about them. In conferences also, you don't see people talking about testability anymore. More the fancy stuff that gets spoken about, that's one area. And corresponding to that, in the world of automation, is automatability. Is your application automatable? Are you looking at the right piece for automating it? or are you thinking about something which will turn into a maintenance nightmare down the line? I mean, this is something that people should think about early. Now, I was in a panel discussion where, one of the panelists had an opinion that, no, we should experiment, we should fail, and then we should arrive at, what to automate, what not to automate. But on one side, if you are saying that, okay, you are agile, then you are obviously thinking of not only about Scrum or Kanban, but you're also thinking of lean ways of working and eliminating waste. So, so by doing all those experiments and failing multiple number of times, how much waste are you accumulating? Now, that's one question that needs to be answered. Now, the third thing that I personally see is that there is a disconnect between product engineering and quality in a lot of organizations. And until these three come together and say, okay, you know what, test automation in itself is a part of the product development life cycle and should not be a silo. Okay, until that is recognized and is made a part of the system, I think we are going nowhere. Okay, so these are, in my opinion, the three problems that we can solve. So it was wonderful to get your ideas on that. Hopefully, this conversation is being heard by a lot of people, and they also start scratching their head and say, "Oh, yeah, we've got to solve this."
But Bridge, what we could actually do, and I love your 3 points, what we could actually do is like, we meet again like in 2 months from now and do a reaction video on our own video. What do you think about that? Because nobody will be offended by that, but we had a little bit of learning phase. You got some comments, you got some feedbacks. We saw new posts on LinkedIn, we saw new articles, and we can go back through this video and do a reaction on it together.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that idea. So I have this this curious bug in my mind as well. So I also watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I watch a lot of these reaction videos. And unfortunately, in the tech space, there is not much, and that is where I feel that you may just hold the niche, but you may be the king. Okay, so that's why my question was: have you tried doing a reaction video on ChatGPT, saying, "Oh wow, this is cool"? Okay, because I have seen testers actually go ahead and try and put out videos. There are some very famous testers who have done that. I have seen their videos. Sometimes I agree with what they think. Sometimes I don't necessarily agree, but that's how it is. So it will be quite interesting to see your reaction. So I'm waiting for that, and let's work on this idea. Okay, in 2 months' time, let's collaborate and do a reaction video together. So that's
the funny part is only us can be offended then by ourselves. So that's
yes. All right, Tobias, thank you so much for your time. It was fantastic talking to you, as always. I mean, it is a fun conversation. There is so much to learn. Every time I speak to you, I come back with a lot of learning. Thank you for this. I am excited and looking forward to meeting you next month. At Eurostar first of. And I also saw your announcement about the Testers Night in June that you will be hosting.
Yeah.
I think it's in June. So let's see if I can make it this time.
That would be brilliant.
It's been long overdue. So
it is definitely.
It's been a while since I visited Zurich as well.
So. Just in case nobody ever told you that, thank you for all your LinkedIn posts. Because it looks like that you do that on a steady basis, like on a like double a day posts. Like there are so many posts coming in from you, and it's really like it's enlightening to have those posts and going through it, because it's actually on your thoughts. Somehow it's like it's you learn something new if you read them.
Thank you so much for that, Tobias. My idea, there are two things, okay, or rather three things which drive my LinkedIn post. One is, my curiosity. So I want to, if I learn something, okay, I would want others to learn as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one thing. So I am curious to see what people have to say about what I have learned. So I put it out there. Sometimes people react, sometimes they don't. Sometimes there are some nasty comments, which is all part of the game, which is all okay. The second thing is, I want to share as much as I can, so I share. And the third thing is, when I see something which is, not cool, or something that irritates me, I want to speak about it. Okay, I can't just sit here and keep thinking about it myself. So I put it out on LinkedIn and I talk about it. Okay, and those are the kind of posts which get a lot of reaction. I did a post a couple of days ago about influencers and how the influencer space is getting polluted. And so, and the kind of conversations that happened, that made me realize that I am not the only one who's seeing this problem. There are others as well, but it is just that they don't speak up in an upfront manner, and when I do, they open up as well. So that's how it is. But yeah, thank you so much. I have seen your comments,
and that is actually a big part of it. Like, you post stuff and people open up afterwards, and they don't want to post on LinkedIn, but they can put a little 1-2 sentence comment in it. But for that, they need posts like yours. And that is actually what is actually one of the biggest benefits on your post, is actually that people react with it, that they comment on it, that they actually have their own thoughts on it, and that is actually what I love on those posts.
Yeah. So once somebody asked me, why don't you always mention the context on your post? So my response to that is quite simple. Okay, I do not necessarily want people to have a biased opinion, because if I just give out the context, then people will start thinking in that direction. So if I want an independent opinion, okay, what is true about that in your context, then I have to leave the context out. Okay, I want to see how people want to interpret that. Okay, and how they fit it in their context and speak out. Now, what may be true for my context may not be true for yours, right? So if I put out things based on my context, some people will say, I agree. Others will say, oh, I don't agree. That's it. And some people will just look at the post and walk away. But if I make it context independent, then what happens is people will interpret in their way and then we'll speak about it. Okay, without any bias. So that's the logical reasoning that I have.
And that is smart, isn't it?
Well, we all learn. So yeah. So thank you so much, Tobias, for your time today. Pleasure talking to you. We will do more of these conversations. I want to invite you to do a webinar soon with us at the test chat. So we will talk about it. Thank you so much, Tobias.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.